1 Samuel chapters 1 to 7. So, this is going to be, this is my favorite book of the Bible, in fact. And I'm really excited to start it because I really love 1 Samuel. So, we'll get right into it. There was a certain man from Ramathaim, a Zuphite from the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, an Ephraimite. He had 2 wives. One was called Hannah, and the other Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had 9. Year after year, this man went up from his town to worship and sacrifice to the Lord Almighty at Shiloh, where Hophni and Phinehas, the 2 sons of Eli, were priests of the Lord. Whenever the day came from Elkanah to sacrifice, he would give portions of the meat to his wife Peninnah and to all her sons and daughters. But Hannah he gave a double portion because he loved her, and the Lord had closed her womb. Because the Lord had closed Hannah's womb, her rival kept provoking her in order to irritate her. This went on year after year. Whenever Hannah went up to the house of the Lord, her rival provoked her until she wept and would not eat. Her husband Elkanah would say to her, "Hannah, why are you weeping? Why don't you eat? Why are you downhearted? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons? Once when they had finished eating and drinking at Shiloh, Hannah stood up. Now Eli the priest was sitting on his chair by the doorpost of the Lord's house. In her deep anguish, Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly. And she made a vow, saying, Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head." As she kept on praying to the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying in her heart, and her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. Eli thought she was drunk and said to her, "How long are you going to stay drunk? Put away your wine." "Not so, my lord," Hannah replied. "I am a woman who is deeply troubled. I have not been drinking wine or beer. I was pouring out my soul to the Lord. Do not take your servant for a wicked woman. I have been praying here out of my great anguish and grief." Eli answered, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him." She said, "May your servant find favor in your eyes." Then she went her way and ate something, and her face was no longer downcast. Early the next morning they arose and worshipped before the Lord, and then went back to their home at Ramah. Elkanah made love to his wife Hannah, and the Lord remembered her. So in the course of time Hannah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, saying, "Because I asked the Lord for him." When her husband Elkanah went up with all his family to offer the annual sacrifice to the Lord and to fulfill his vow, Hannah did not go. She said to her husband, "After the boy is weaned, I will take him and present him before the Lord, and he will live there always." "Do what seems best to you," her husband Elkanah told her. "Stay here until you have weaned him. Only may the Lord make good his word." So the woman stayed at home and nursed her son until she had weaned him. After he was weaned, she took the boy with her, young as he was, along with a 3-year-old bull, an ephah of flour, and a skin of wine, and brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh. When the bull had been sacrificed, they brought the boy to Eli, and she said to him, "Pardon me, my lord, as surely as you live, I am the woman who stood here beside you praying to the Lord. I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I asked of him, so now I give him to the Lord. For his whole life he will be given over to the Lord." And he worshipped the Lord there. Then Hannah prayed and said, "My heart rejoices in the Lord. In the Lord my horn is lifted high. My mouth boasts over my enemies, for I delight in your deliverance. There is no one holy like the Lord. There is no one besides you. There is no rock like our Lord. Do not keep talking so proudly, or let your mouth speak such arrogance, for the Lord is a God who knows, and by him deeds are weighed. The bows of the warriors are broken, but those who stumbled are armed with strength. Those who were full hire themselves out for food. But those who were hungry are hungry no more. She who was barren has borne 7 children, but she who has had many sons pines away. The Lord brings death and makes alive. He brings down to the grave and raises up. The Lord sends poverty and wealth. He humbles and he exalts. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap. He seats them with princes, and has them inherit a throne of honor. For the foundations of the earth are the Lord's. On them he has set the world. He will guard the feet of his faithful servants, but the wicked will be silenced in the place of darkness. It is not by strength that one prevails. Those who oppose the Lord will be broken. The Most High will thunder from heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. Then Elkanah went home to Ramah, but the boy ministered before the Lord under Eli the priest. Eli's sons were scoundrels. They had no regard for the Lord. Now it was the practice of the priest that whenever any of the people offered a sacrifice, the priest's servant would come with a three-pronged fork in his hand while the meat was being boiled, and would plunge the fork into the pan, or kettle, or cauldron, or pot. Whatever the fork brought up, the priest would take for himself. This is how they treated all the Israelites who came to Shiloh. But even before the fat was burned, the priest's servant would come and say to the person who was sacrificing, "Give the priest some meat to roast. He won't accept boiled meat from you, but only raw." If the person said to him, "Let the fat be burned first, and then take whatever you want," the servant would answer, "No, hand it over now. If you don't, I'll take it by force." This sin of the young men was very great in the Lord's sight, for they were treating the Lord's offering with contempt. But Samuel was ministering before the Lord, a boy wearing a linen ephod. Each year his mother made him a little robe and took it to him when she went up with her husband to offer the annual sacrifice. Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife, saying, "May the Lord give you children by this woman to take the place of the one she prayed for and gave to the Lord." Then they would go home, and the Lord was gracious to Hannah. She gave birth to 3 sons and 2 daughters. Meanwhile, the boy Samuel grew up in the presence of the Lord. Now Eli, who was very old, heard about everything his sons were doing to all Israel, and how they slept with the women who served at the entrance to the tent of meeting. So he said to them, "Why do you do such things? I hear from all the people about these wicked deeds of yours. No, my sons, to be put I hear spreading among the Lord's people is not good. If one person sins against another, God may mediate for the offender. But if anyone sins against the Lord, who will intercede for them?" His sons, however, did not listen to their father's rebuke, for it was the Lord's will to put them to death. And the boy Samuel continued to grow in stature and in favor with the Lord and with people. Now a man of God came to Eli and said to him, "This is what the Lord says. Did I not clearly reveal myself to your ancestors' family when they were in Egypt under Pharaoh? I chose your ancestor out of all the tribes of Israel to be my priest, to go up to my altar, to burn incense, and to wear an ephod in my presence. I also gave your ancestors' family all the food offerings presented by Israelites. Why do you scorn my sacrifice and offering that I prescribed for my dwelling? Why do you honor your sons more than me by fattening yourselves on the choice parts of every offering made by my people Israel? Therefore the Lord, the God of Israel, declares, I promised that members of your family would minister before me forever. But now the Lord declares, far be it from me. Those who honor me I will honor, but those who despise me will be disdained. The time is coming when I will cut short your strength and the strength of your priestly house, so that no one in it will reach old age, and you will see distress in my dwelling. Although good will be done to Israel, no one in your family line will ever reach old age. Every one of you that I do not cut off from serving at my altar I will spare, only to destroy your sight and sap your strength, and all your descendants will die in the prime of life. And what happens to your 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, will be a sign to you. They will both die on the same day. I will raise up for myself a faithful priest, who will do according to what is in my heart and mind. I will firmly establish his priestly house, and they will minister before my anointed one always. Then everyone left in your family line will come and bow down before him for a piece of silver and a loaf of bread, and plead, appoint me to some priestly office, so I can have food to eat. Wow. The boy Samuel ministered before the Lord under Eli. In those days the word of the Lord was rare. There were not many visions. One night Eli, whose eyes were becoming so weak that he could barely see, was lying down in his usual place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the house of the Lord, where the ark of God was. Then the Lord called Samuel. Samuel answered, Here I am. And he ran to Eli and said, Here I am. You called me? But Eli said, I did not call. Go back and lie down. So he went and lay down. Again the Lord called Samuel, and Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, Here I am. You called me. My son, Eli said, I did not call. Go back and lie down. Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord. The word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. A third time the Lord called Samuel, and Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, Here I am, you called me. Then Eli realized that the Lord was calling the boy. So Eli told Samuel, Go and lie down, and if he calls you, say, Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. So Samuel went down and lay down So Samuel went and lay down in his place. The Lord came and stood there, calling as at the other times, Samuel, Samuel. Then Samuel said, Speak, for your servant is listening. And the Lord said to Samuel, See, I am about to do something in Israel that will make the ears of everyone who hears about it tingle. At that time I will carry out against Eli everything I spoke against his family, from beginning to end. For I told him that I would judge his family forever because of the sin he knew about. His sons blasphemed God, and he failed to restrain them. Therefore I swore to the house of Eli, the guilt of Eli's house will never be atoned for by sacrifice or offering. Samuel lay down until morning, and then opened the doors of the house of the Lord. He was afraid to tell Eli the vision, but Eli called him and said, Samuel, my son. Samuel answered, Here I am. What is it he said to you? Eli asked. Do not hide it from me. May God deal with you, be it ever so severely. If you hide from me anything, he told you. So Samuel told him everything, hiding nothing from him. Then Eli said, He is the Lord, let him do what is good in his eyes. The Lord was with Samuel as he grew up, and he let none of Samuel's words fall to the ground. And all Israel from Dan to Beersheba recognized that Samuel was attested as a prophet of the Lord. The Lord continued to appear at Shiloh, and there he revealed himself to Samuel through his word. And Samuel's word came to all Israel. Now the Israelites went out to fight against the Philistines. The Israelites camped at Ebenezer, and the Philistines at Aphek. The Philistines deployed their forces to meet Israel, and at their battle spread, Israel was defeated by the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 of them on the battlefield. When the soldiers returned to camp, the elders of Israel asked, Why did the Lord bring defeat on us today before the Philistines? Let us bring the ark of the Lord's covenant from Shiloh, so that he may go with us and save us from the hand of our enemies. So the people sent men to Shiloh, and they brought back the ark of the covenant of the Lord Almighty, who is enthroned between the cherubim. And Eli's 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the ark of the covenant of God. When the ark of the Lord's covenant came into the camp, all Israel raised such a great shout that the ground shook. Hearing the uproar, the Philistines asked, What's all this shouting in the Hebrew camp? When they learned that the ark of the Lord had come into the camp, the Philistines were afraid. A god has come into the camp, they said. Oh no, nothing like this has happened before. We're doomed. Who will deliver us from the hand of these mighty gods? They are the gods who struck the Egyptians with all kind of plagues in the wilderness. Be strong, Philistines, be men, or you will be subject to the Hebrews, as they have been to you. Be men and fight. So the Philistines fought, and the Israelites were defeated, and every man fled to his tent. The slaughter was very great. Israel lost 30,000 foot soldiers, the ark of God was captured, and Eli's 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, died. That same day, a Benjamite ran from the battle line and went to Shiloh with his clothes torn and dust on his head. When he arrived, there was Eli sitting on his chair by the side of the road, watching, because his heart feared for the ark of God. When the man entered the town and told what had happened, the whole town sent up a cry. Eli heard the outcry and asked, What is the meaning of this uproar? The man hurried over to Eli, who was 98 years old, and whose eyes had failed so that he could not see. He told Eli, I have just come from the battle lines. I fled from it this very day. Eli asked, What happened, my son? The man who brought the news replied, Israel fled before the Philistines, and the army had suffered heavy losses. Also your 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark of God has been captured. When he mentioned the ark of God, Eli fell backward off his chair by the side of the gate. His neck was broken, and he died. For he was an old man, and he was heavy. He had led Israel 40 years. His daughter-in-law, the wife of Phinehas, was pregnant and near the time of delivery. When she heard the news that the ark of God had been captured and that her father-in-law and her husband were dead, she went into labor and gave birth, but was overcome by her labor pains. As she was dying, the women attended her said, Don't despair, you have given birth to a son. But she did not respond or pay any attention. She named the boy Ishabad, saying, The glory has departed from Israel. Because of the capture of the ark of God and the deaths of her father-in-law and her husband, she said, The glory has departed from Israel, for the ark of God has been captured. After the Philistines had captured the ark of God, they took it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. Then they carried the ark into Dagon's temple and set it beside Dagon. When the people of Ashdod rose early the next day, there was Dagon fallen on his face on the ground before the ark of the Lord. They took Dagon and put him back in his place, but the following morning when they rose, there was Dagon fallen on his face on the ground before the ark of the Lord. His head and hands had been broken off and were lying on the threshold, only his body remained. That is why to this day neither the priests of Dagon nor any others who enter Dagon's temple at Ashdod step on the threshold. The Lord's hand was heavy on the people of Ashdod and its vicinity. He brought devastation on them and afflicted them with tumors. When the people of Ashdod saw what was happening, they said, "The ark of the God of Israel must not stay here with us, because his hand is heavy on us and on Dagon our God." So they called together all the rulers of the Philistines and asked them, "What shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel?" They answered, "Have the ark of the God of Israel moved to Gath." So they moved the ark of the God of Israel. But after they had moved it, the Lord's hand was against that city, throwing it into a great panic. He afflicted the people of the city, both young and old, with an outbreak of tumors. So they sent the ark of God to Ekron. As the ark of God was entering Ekron, the people of Ekron cried out, "They have brought the ark of the God of Israel around to us to kill us and our people." So they called together all the rulers of the Philistines and said, "Send the ark of the God of Israel away. Let it go back to its own place, or it will kill us and our people." For death had filled the city with panic. God's hand was very heavy on it. Those who did not die were afflicted with tumors, and the outcry of the city went up to heaven. When the ark of the Lord had been in Philistine territory 7 months, the Philistines called for the priests and the diviners and said, "What shall we do with the ark of the Lord? Tell us how we should send it back to its place." They answered, "If you return the ark of the God of Israel, do not send it back to him without a gift. By all means, send a guilt offering to him. Then you will be healed, and you will know why his hand has not been lifted from you." The Philistines asked, "What guilt offering should we send to him?" They replied, 5 gold tumors and 5 gold rats, according to the number of the Philistine rulers, because the same plague has struck both you and your rulers. Make models of the tumors and of the rats that are destroying the country, and give glory to Israel's God. Perhaps he will lift his hand from you and your gods and your land. Why do you harden your hearts as the Egyptians and Pharaoh did? When Israel's God dealt harshly with them, did they not send the Israelites out so they could go on their own way? Now then, get a new cart ready with 2 cows that have calves and have never been yoked. Hitch the cows to the cart, but take the calves away and pin them up. Take the ark of the Lord and put it on the cart, and in a chest beside it put the gold objects you are sending back to him as a guilt offering. Send it on its way, but keep watching it. If it goes up to its own territory towards Beth-Shemesh, then the Lord has brought this great disaster on us. But if it does not, then we will know that it was not his hand that struck us, but that it happened to us by chance. So they did this. They took 2 such cows and hitched them to the cart and pinned up their calves. They placed the ark of the God on the cart, and along with its chest containing the gold rats and the models of the tumors. Then the cows went straight up toward the Beth-Shemesh, keeping on the road and lowing all the way. They did not turn to the right or to the left. The rulers of the Philistines followed them as far as the border of Beth-Shemesh. Now the people of Beth-Shemesh were harvesting their wheat in the valley. And when they looked up and saw the ark, they rejoiced at the sight. The ark came to the field of Joshua of Beth-Shemesh, and there it stopped beside a large rock. The people chopped up the wood of the cart and sacrificed the cows as a burnt offering to the Lord. The Levites took down the ark of the Lord, together with the chest containing the gold objects, and placed them on the large rock. On that day the people of Beth-Shemesh offered burnt offerings and made sacrifices to the Lord. The 5 rulers of the Philistines saw all this, and then returned that same day to Ekron. These are the gold tumors the Philistines sent as a guilt offering to the Lord, 1 each for Ashdod, Gaza, Ashkelon, Gath, and Ekron. And the number of the gold rats was according to the number of Philistine towns belonging to the 5 rulers, the fortified towns with their country villages. The large rock on which the Levites set the ark of the Lord is a witness to this day in the field of Joshua of Beth-Shemesh. But God struck down some of the inhabitants of Beth-Shemesh, putting 70 of them to death because they looked into the ark of the Lord. The people mourned because of the heavy blow the Lord had dealt them. And the people of Beth-Shemesh asked, "Who can stand in the presence of the Lord, this holy God? To whom will the ark go up from here?" Then they sent messages to the people of Kiriath-Jearim, saying, "The Philistines have returned the ark of the Lord. Come down and take it up to your own town." So the men of Kiriath-Jearim came and took up the ark of the Lord. They brought it to Abinadab's house on the hill, and consecrated Eleazar his son to guard the ark of the Lord. The ark remained at Kiriath-Jearim a long time, 20 years in all. Then all the people of Israel turned back to the Lord. So Samuel said to all the Israelites, "If you are returning to the Lord with all your hearts, then rid yourselves of the foreign gods and the Ashtoreths, and commit yourselves to the Lord, and serve him only. And he will deliver you out of the hand of the Philistines." So the Israelites put away their Baals and Ashtoreths, and served the Lord only. Then Samuel said, "Assemble all Israel at Mizpah, and I will intercede with the Lord for you." When they had assembled at Mizpah, they drew water and poured it out before the Lord. On that day they fasted, and there they confessed, "We have sinned against the Lord." Now Samuel was serving as leader of Israel at Mizpah. When the Philistines heard that Israel had assembled at Mizpah, the rulers of the Philistines came up to attack them. When the Israelites heard of it, they were afraid because of the Philistines. They said to Samuel, "Do not stop crying out to the Lord our God for us, that he may rescue us from the hand of the Philistines." And Samuel took a suckling lamb and sacrificed it as a whole burnt offering to the Lord. He cried out to the Lord on Israel's behalf, and the Lord answered him. While Samuel was sacrificing the burnt offering, the Philistines drew near to engage Israel in battle. But that day the Lord thundered with loud thunder against the Philistines and threw them into such a panic that they were routed before the Israelites. The men of Israel rushed out of Mizpah and pursued the Philistines, slaughtering them along the way to a point below Bethkar. Then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shin. He named it Ebenezer, saying, "Thus far the Lord has helped us." So the Philistines were subdued, and they stopped invading Israel's territory. Throughout Samuel's lifetime, the hand of the Lord was against the Philistines. The towns from Ekron to Gath that the Philistines had captured from Israel were restored to Israel, and Israel delivered the neighboring territory from the hands of the Philistines, and there was peace between Israel and the Amorites. Samuel continued as Israel's leader all the days of his life. From year to year, he went on a circuit from Bethel to Gilgal to Mizpah, judging Israel in all those places. But he always went back to Ramah, where his home was, and there he also held court for Israel, and he built an altar there to the Lord. All right, that's chapters 1 through 7. It's good. It's good. I love it. All right, just had to flip a few pages. Alright, so verse 1 says, "There was a certain man from Ramathaim, a Zuphite from the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, an Ephraimite." So, the book of 1 Samuel begins in the days when the judges still ruled Israel, possibly during the closing years of Samson's life. Samuel was Israel's last judge and the first priest and prophet to serve during the time of a king. He was the best example of what a good judge should be, governing the people by God's word and not by his own impulses. Samuel was the man who anointed Saul as Israel's first king. Although this chapter begins with "there was a certain man," Hannah and her faith are the real focus of the story. Verse 2 says, he had 2 wives. One was called Hannah and the other Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had none. Although many great Old Testament leaders such as Abraham, Jacob, and David had more than one wife, this was not God's original intention for marriage, nor is it his intention today. Genesis chapter 2, verse 24 states that in marriage 2 people become one. Why then did polygamy exist among God's people? It allowed families to produce more offspring to help provide labor and to assure the continuation of the family line. Numerous children were a symbol of status and wealth. In societies where many young men were killed in battle, polygamy became an accepted way of supporting women who otherwise would have remained unmarried and very likely destitute. Nevertheless, polygamy is never endorsed in the Bible. On the contrary, it usually caused serious family problems, as we see in the story of Hannah and Peninnah. Verse 3 says, "Year after year, this man went up from his town of worship and sacrificed to the Lord Almighty at Shiloh, where Hophni and Phinehas, the 2 sons of Eli, were priests of the Lord." The tabernacle, tent of meeting, whatever you want to call it, was located at Shiloh, the religious center of the nation. 3 times a year, all Israelite men were required to attend a religious festival held at the tabernacle. The Passover was the festival of unleavened bread, the festival of weeks, and the festival of tabernacles. Elkanah made this pilgrimage regularly to fulfill God's commands. For the regulations, it goes over the regulations concerning the pilgrimage, and it just goes over that in Exodus 40. No, it goes over that in Exodus 23, the pilgrimage, and it also talks about the tabernacle in Exodus 40. That's what I meant to say. Verse 6, if you want to read that. Verse 6 says, "Because the Lord had closed Hannah's womb, her rival kept provoking her in order to irritate her." Hannah had been unable to conceive children, and in Old Testament times, childless women were seen as flawed and inferior to women who could bear children. Their barrenness was a social embarrassment for their husbands. Children were a very important part of the society's economic structure. They were a source of labor for their families, and they had the duty of caring for their parents in their old age. If a wife could not bear children, she was often obligated by ancient Middle Eastern custom to give one of her servant girls to her husband to bear children for her. Although Elkanah could have left Hannah, her husband was permitted to divorce a barren wife. He remained lovingly devoted to her despite social pressure and his watching under civil law. verse 7 says, "This went on year after year. Whenever Hannah went up to the house of the Lord, her rival provoked her till she wept and would not eat." Part of God's plan for Hannah involved postponing her years of childbearing. While Peninnah looked at Hannah's outward circumstances, God was moving ahead with his plan. Think of those in your world who are struggling with God's timing in answering their prayers and who need your love and help. By supporting them, you may help them remain steadfast in their faith and confident in God's timing to bring fulfillment to their lives. Verse 8 says, her husband Elkanah would say to her, "Hannah, why are you weeping? Why don't you eat? Why are you downhearted? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons?" So, Hannah knew her husband loved her, but even his encouragement could not comfort her. She could not keep from hearing Peninnah's jeers and letting her hurtful words erode her self-confidence. Although we cannot keep others from unjustly criticizing us, we can choose how we will react to their words. Rather than dwelling upon our problems, we can enjoy the loving relationships God has given us. By so doing, we can exchange self-pity and despair for hope and optimism. Don't be too optimistic. Remember, we learned about that in Romans. Don't have an optimistic attitude all the time, alright? You can't expect to do good and receive good back, alright? Maybe in the eternal run, alright? Eternal life, oh yeah, do good on earth, you get good up there. But don't expect all the time to do good on earth and next day you get good back to you on earth. We talked about that in Romans if you want to go watch those videos. Verse 10 says, "In her deep anguish, Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly." Hannah had good reason to feel discouraged and bitter. She was unable to bear children. She shared her husband with a woman who ridiculed her. Her loving husband could not solve her problem, and even the high priest misunderstood her motives. But instead of reacting with anger or giving up hope, Hannah prayed. She brought her problem honestly before God. We may face times of barrenness when nothing comes to birth in our work, service, or relationships. Praying in faith is difficult when we feel so ineffective and alone. But as Hannah discovered, prayer opens the way for God to work. Verse 11 says, "And she made a vow, saying, Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head." In return for being able to conceive a son, Hannah vowed to dedicate him to God for lifetime service. Hannah may have been making a Nazirite vow, which parents could take for their unborn children. The Nazirite vow promised that a person would be set apart for special service to God. As long as the vow was in effect, the person's hair could not be cut. Although some vows were temporary, Hannah's vow for Samuel was for life. Be careful what you promise in prayer, because God may hold you to it. Hannah so desperately wanted a child that she was willing to strike a bargain with God. God took her up on her promise, and to Hannah's credit, she kept her word, even though it must have been painful. Although we are not in position to barter with God, we may still choose to answer prayer that has an actual promise. When you pray, ask yourself, will I follow through on any promises I make to God if he gives me what I ask? To ignore a promise, especially to God, is dishonest and potentially disastrous. God keeps his promises, and he expects you to keep yours. Hannah fulfilled her promise to God, and he blessed her with 5 more children. Verses 12 and 14 says, as she kept on praying to the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying in her heart, and her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. Eli thought she was drunk, and he said to her, "How long are you going to stay drunk? Put away your wine." When he noticed that something seemed wrong with another person, what is his first reaction? Eli made a snap judgment about Hannah before he knew all the facts. It is easy to misunderstand motives and actions, and doing so can cause us to make assumptions about others that are not true. Be sensitive to the fact that, like Hannah, anyone you encounter may be carrying a tremendous burden. Verse 18 says, she said, "May your servant find favor in your eyes." Then she went her way and ate something, and her face was no longer downcast. Earlier, Hannah had been discouraged to the point of being physically sick and unable to eat. At this point, she returned home well and happy. The change in her attitude may be attributed to 3 factors. She prayed honestly to God, not holding anything back from him. She had received encouragement from Eli, and she had resolved to leave the problem with God. This is the antidote for discouragement. Tell God how you really feel and leave your problems with him. And rely upon the support of good friends and counselors. Verse 26 through 28 says, And she said to him, Pardon me, my lord, as surely as you live, I am the woman who stood here beside you praying to the Lord. I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I asked of him. So now I give him to the Lord for his whole life. He will be given over to the Lord, and he worshipped the Lord there. To do what she promised, Hannah gave up what she wanted most, her son, and presented him to Eli to serve in the house of the Lord. And dedicating her only son to God, Hannah was dedicating her entire life and future to him. Because Samuel's life was from God, Hannah was not really giving him up. Rather, she was returning him to God, who had been the one who gave him to Hannah in the first place. These verses illustrate the kind of gifts we should give to God. Do your gifts cost you little, or are they gifts of sacrifice? Are you presenting God with tokens, or are you presenting him with your entire life? Samuel was at least 3 years old. The customary age for weaning was 3 to 5 years, or even older. When his mother left him at the tabernacle by saying, I gave him to the Lord, Hannah meant that she was dedicating Samuel to God for lifetime service. She did not, of course, forget her much-wanted son. She visited him regularly, and each year she brought him a new robe to wear. In later years, Samuel lived in Ramah, his parents' hometown. And then we see Hannah's prayer in chapter 2. Hannah praised God for his answer to a prayer for a son. Her confidence in God's sovereignty and her thankfulness for everything he had done are the themes of her poetic prayer. Mary, the mother of Jesus, modeled her own praise song called the Magnificat. Magnificat. I think that's what it's called, Magnificat. After Hannah's prayer, like Hannah and Mary, we should be confident in God's ultimate control over the events in our lives. And we should be thankful for the ways God has blessed us by praising God for all the good gifts. We acknowledge his ultimate control over all affairs of life. Moving on. Verse 2 says, of chapter 2, There is no one holy like the Lord. There is no one beside you. There is no rock like our God. Hannah praised God for being a rock, firm, strong, and unchanging. In our fast-paced world, people come and go and circumstances change. It's difficult to find a solid foundation that will not change. Those who devote their lives to achievements, causes, or possessions try to find security in what is finite and changeable. The possessions that we work so hard to obtain will all pass away, but God is always present. Hope in him, he will never fail. Heaven and earth may pass away, but Jesus' words will never will. Verse 3 says, Do not keep talking so proudly, or let your mouth speak such arrogance, for the Lord is a God who knows, and by him deeds are weighed. No doubt, as Hannah said these words, she was thinking of Peninnah's arrogance and chiding. Hannah did not have to get even with Peninnah. She knew that God is all-knowing and that he will judge all sin and pride. Hannah wisely left judgment up to God. Resist the temptation to take justice into your own hands, and God will weigh your deeds as well as the deeds of those who have wronged you. Verse 10 says, Those who oppose the Lord will be broken. The Most High will thunder from heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. It's pretty awesome. That was verse 10, right? Yeah. So because we live in a world where evil abounds and where war and terrorism always is threatened, we may forget that God is in control. Call it as a rock, the one who knows what we have to, the one who knows what we do. He is sovereign over everything and everyone, and the supreme judge who administers perfect justice. Remembering God's sovereign control helps us put both world and personal events in perspective. I'm going to read verse 11, and then I'm going to skip over to 18. And Elkanah went home to Ramah, but the boy ministered before the Lord under Eli the priest. But Samuel was ministering before the Lord. This is verse 18 now. But Samuel was ministering before the Lord, a boy wearing a linen ephod. There you go. Samuel ministered before the Lord under Eli the priest. In other words, Samuel was Eli's helper or assistant. In this role, Samuel's responsibilities would have included opening the tabernacle entrances each morning, cleaning the furniture, and sweeping the floors. As he grew older, he would have assisted Eli in offering sacrifices. Wearing a special linen garment like those worn by priests, in Hebrew called an ephod, showed that he was a priest in training. Because Samuel was Eli's helper, he was God's helper too. When we serve others, even in carrying out ordinary tasks like sweeping the floor or doing the dishes, we are serving God. In God's service, every job has dignity. So verses 12 through 36, there's a lot, but so the law stipulated that the needs of all the Levites were to be met through the people's tithes. Because Eli's sons were priests, they were to be provided for in this way. But Eli's sons took advantage of their position to satisfy their lust for power, sex, possessions, and control. Their contempt and arrogance toward both people and worship undermined the integrity of the whole priesthood. The evil ways contrasted sharply with young Samuel's attitudes and values, which showed complete commitment to God. Eli knew that his sons were evil, but he did little to correct or stop them, even when the integrity of God's sanctuary was threatened. As the high priest, Eli should have responded by banishing or even executing his sons. No wonder he chose not to confront the situation, but by ignoring their selfish actions, Eli let his sons ruin their own lives and the lives of many others. It can be especially hard to confront serious sin issues in the lives of those closest to us, but there are times when serious problems must be confronted, even if the process and consequences will be painful. Verses 13 to 17 says, Now it was the practice of the priest that whenever any of the person... No, wait, hold on. Verse 13 to 17. I'm going to restart. Now it was the practice of the priest that whenever any of the people offered a sacrifice, the priest's servants would come with a 3-pronged fork in his hand while the meat was being boiled, and would plunge the fork into the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot. Whatever the fork brought up, the priest would take for himself. This is how they treated all the Israelites who came to Shiloh. But even before the fat was burned, the priest's servant would come and say to the person who was sacrificing, Give the priest some meat to roast. He won't accept boiled meat from you, but only raw. If the person said to him, Let the fat be burned first, and then take whatever you want, the servant would answer, No, hand it over now. If you don't, I will take it by force. The sin of the young men was very great in the Lord's sight, for they were treating the Lord's offering with contempt. What were Eli's sons doing wrong? They were taking parts of the sacrifices before they were offered to God on the altar. They were also eating meat before the fat was burned off, which was against God's law. In effect, Eli's sons were treating God's offerings with contempt. Offerings were given to show honor and respect to God while seeking forgiveness for sins. But through their irreverence, Eli's sons were actually sinning while making the offerings. To add to their sins, they were also sleeping with the women who served at the tabernacle. Like Eli's sons, some religious leaders took down on the fate of ordinary people and treat their offerings to God casually or even with contempt. God harshly judges those who lead his people astray or scorn what has been devoted to him. This fork that they used to put in the little pot and whatever portion of the meat they would eat was a utensil used in the tabernacle to handle the sacrificial meat. It was made of bronze. It usually had 3 prongs to hook the meat as it was put on the altar or cooked in a boiling pot. Eli's sons used this fork to take more meat from the pot than was due them. Though the burnt offerings were burned completely on the altar, some of the other offerings were cooked and shared among the priest and worshippers in a celebration feast. So in addition to other sins, Eli's sons were stealing more than their share of meat from the families worshipping at the tabernacle. So Samuel was a young child, and yet he was ministering before the Lord. Children can often serve God just as effectively as adults. God will use anyone who is willing to learn from him and serve him. He has no age limits. We shouldn't discount the faith of a child or let age keep anyone from serving God. Samuel wore a special linen garment, in Hebrew called an ephod. These long sleeveless vests made of plain linen were worn by all priests. The high priest's ephod carries special significance. It was embroidered with a variety of bright colors. Attached to it was the breastplate, a bib-like garment with gold embroidered shoulder straps. 12 precious gemstones were attached to the breastpiece, each stone representing one of the tribes of Israel. This breastpiece also provided a pouch to hold the Urim and the Thummim, 2 small objects used to determine God's will in a certain national matters. Verse 21 says, if I can find it. And the Lord was gracious to Hannah. She gave birth to 3 sons and 2 daughters. Meanwhile, the boy Samuel grew up in the presence of the Lord. God honored the desires of faithful Hannah. We never hear about Peninnah or her children again, but Samuel was used mightily by God. God also gave Hannah 5 children in addition to Samuel. God often blesses us in ways we do not expect. Hannah didn't dare expect to have a child at her age, much less 6 children. Fight the temptation to resent God's timing when He tells you to wait. His blessings might not be immediate, but He will bless us if we are faithful to do what He says in His word. Verse 23 to 25 says, So he said to them, Why do you do such things? I hear from all the people about these wicked deeds of yours. No, my sons, the report I hear spreading among the Lord's people is not good. If one person sins against another, God may mediate for the offender, but if anyone sins against the Lord, who will intercede for them? His sons, however, did not listen to their father's rebuke, for it was the Lord's will to put them to death. So, Eli's sons knew better, but they continued to disobey God deliberately by cheating, seducing, and robbing the people. Therefore, God planned to execute them. Any sin is wrong, but sin carried out deliberately and deceitfully, especially in a religious context, is the worst kind. When we sin out of ignorance, we deserve punishment, but when we sin intentionally, the consequences will be more severe. Don't ignore God's warnings about sin. When we find ourselves continuing in habitual sin, we need to reach out to God and other believers to seek forgiveness and find help in turning from it. Does our loving God really will or want to put people to death? Consider the situation in the tabernacle. A person would make an offering in order to have sin forgiven, and Eli's sons would steal the offering and make a sham of the person's repentant attitude. God, in His love for Israel, could not permit this situation to continue. He allowed Eli's sons to die as a result of their own boastful presumption. They took the ark into battle thinking it would protect them, but God withdrew His protection, and the wicked sons of Eli were killed. Verse 26 says, And the boy Samuel continued to grow in stature and in favor with the Lord and with people. The record of Samuel's growth and maturity compares to the description of Jesus and Luke, which we're also going to be reading today, and God's hand was certainly on both of them, obviously. Verse 29 says, Why do you scorn my sacrifice and offering that I prescribed for my dwelling? Why do you honor your sons more than me by fattening yourselves on the choice parts of every offering made by my people Israel? Eli had a difficult time raising his sons. He apparently did not take any strong disciplinary action with them when he became aware of their wrongdoing, but Eli was not just a father trying to handle his rebellious sons. He was the high priest, ignoring the sins of priests under his supervision. As a result, the Lord took the necessary disciplinary action that Eli would not. Eli was guilty of honoring his sons above God by letting them continue their sinful actions. Is there a situation in your life, family, or work that you allow to continue even though you know it is wrong? If so, you may become as guilty as those engaged in the wrong act. Honor God more highly than anything else, and don't wait for Him to intervene for you. So, we're going to read verse 31 and 35 and 36. Alright? Verse 31 says, The time is coming when I will cut short your strength and the strength of your priestly house, so that no one in it will reach the old age. And skipping over to verse 35 and 6 says, I will raise up for myself a faithful priest who will do according to what is in my heart and mind. I will firmly establish his priestly house, and they will minister before my anointed one always. Then everyone left in your family line will come and bow down before him for a piece of silver and a loaf of bread and plead, Appoint me to some priestly office so I can have food to eat. For the fulfillment of this prediction, it happens in 1 Kings. Here Solomon removed Abiathar from his position, thus ending Eli's line. Then God raised up Zadok, a priest under David, and then high priest under Solomon. Zadok's line was probably still in place as late as the days of Ezra. Verse 1 through 7 says, the boy Samuel, of chapter 3 by the way, the boy Samuel ministered before the Lord under Eli. In those days the word of the Lord was rare. There were not many visions. One night Eli, whose eyes were becoming so weak that he could barely see, was lying down in his usual place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the house of the Lord where the ark of God was. Then the Lord called Samuel. Samuel answered, Here I am. And he ran to Eli and said, Here I am, you called me. But Eli said, I did not call. Go back and lie down. So he went and lay down. Again the Lord called Samuel, and Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, Here I am, you called me. My son Eli said, I did not call. Go back and lie down. Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord. The word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. So, although God had spoken directly and audibly with Moses and Joshua, his word became rare during the 3 centuries of rule by judges. By Eli's time, few prophets were speaking God's messages to Israel. Why? Look at the attitude of Eli's sons. They, like many others at this time, either refused to listen to God or allowed greed to get in the way of any communication with him. Listening and responding is vital in a relationship with God. Although God does not always use the sound of a human voice, he always speaks clearly through the Bible. To receive his messages, we must be ready to listen and to act upon what he tells us. Like Samuel, be ready to say, Here I am, when God calls you to listen and calls you to action. The ark of God was kept in the most holy place, the innermost room of the tabernacle, where only the high priest could enter once a year. In front of the most holy place was the holy place, a small room where the other sacred furniture of the tabernacles was kept, the altar of incense, the table for the special showbread, and the lampstand. Just outside the holy place was a courtyard with small rooms where the priests were to stay. Samuel probably slept here with the other priests only a few yards away from the ark. Verse 8 through 9 says, I can get to it. A third time the Lord called Samuel, and Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, Here I am, you called me. Then Eli realized that the Lord was calling the boy. So Eli told Samuel, Go and lie down, and if he calls you, say, Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. So Samuel went down and lay down in his place. One would naturally expect an audible message from God to be given to the high priest Eli, and not to the child Samuel. Eli was older and more experienced, and he held the proper position that God's chain of command is based on faith and an openness to listen, not on age or position. In finding faithful followers, God may use something unexpected. Be prepared for the Lord to work at any place, any time, and through anyone he chooses. I'll be right back. I didn't realize I've been on mute. Wow. Alright. Sorry. Verse 13, alright? No, verse 10, because we were on mute. Verse 10 says, The Lord came and stood there, calling as at the other time, Samuel, Samuel. Then Samuel said, Speak, for your servant is listening. Samuel was young, but he was learning to listen to God. Many priests and even King Saul would not do so. The whole nation of Israel found it difficult. Each day we can begin our prayers this way, Speak to me, Lord, I'm listening. Verse 13 says, For I told him that I would judge his family forever because of the sin he knew about. His sons blasphemed God, and he failed to restrain them. Eli had spent his entire life in service to God. His responsibility was to oversee all the worship in Israel, but in pursuing this great mission, he neglected the responsibilities in his own home. Don't let your desire to do God's work cause you to neglect your family. If you do, your mission may degenerate into a quest for personal importance, and your family will suffer the consequences of your neglection. Verse 14 says, Therefore I swore to the house of Eli, the guilt of Eli's house will never be atoned for by sacrifice or offering. Atoned for means forgiven. God was saying that the sins of Eli's sons could not be covered by sacrifice, and that their punishment was certain. These sins were so serious, and Eli's sons so entrenched in their wicked ways that there was no remedy for the situation. Verse 20 says, And all Israel from Dan to Beersheba recognized that Samuel was attested as a prophet of the Lord. The phrase from Dan to Beersheba was often used to describe the boundaries of the Promised Land. Dan was one of the northernmost cities in the land, and Beersheba was one of the cities farthest south. In this context, it was a way of emphasizing that everyone in Israel knew that Samuel had been called to be a prophet. We talked about that in Judges, by the way. Not Samuel, but how Dan and Beersheba was to pretty much sum up all Israel. Cough is not as bad today, so that's good. Verse 1 of chapter 4 says, verse 1 of chapter 4. Sorry, I got a little confused. Now the Israelites went out to fight against the Philistines. The Israelites camped at Ebenezer, and the Philistines at Aphek. The Philistines, descendants of Noah's son Ham, settled along the southern eastern Mediterranean coast between Egypt and Gaza. They had originally migrated to the Middle East in ships from Greece and Crete. The Egyptians had referred to the Philistines as a sea people due to their migration across the Mediterranean. By Samuel's time, these warlike people were well established in 5 of Gaza's cities in southwest Canaan and were constantly pressing inland against the Israelites. Throughout this time, the Philistines were Israel's major enemy. They had iron chariots and an organized infantry. Israel was no match for them. Verse 3 of chapter 4 says, When the soldiers returned to camp, the elders of Israel asked, Why did the Lord bring defeat on us today before the Philistines? Let us bring the ark of the Lord's covenant from Shiloh, so that he may go with us and save us from the hand of our enemies. The ark of the covenant contained the 10 commandments given by God to Moses, a jar of manna and Aaron's staff. The ark was supposed to be kept in the most holy place, a sacred part of the tabernacle that only the high priest could enter once a year. Hophni and Phinehas desecrated the room by unlawfully entering it and removing the ark. The Israelites rightly recognized the great holiness of the ark, but they thought that the ark itself, the wood and metal box, was their source of power. They began to use it as a good luck charm, expecting it to protect them from their enemies. A symbol of God does not guarantee his presence and power. The attitude toward the ark came perilously close to idol worship. When the ark was captured by their enemies, the Israelites thought their glory was gone and that God had deserted them. God uses his power according to his own wisdom and will also. He will respond to the faith of those who seek him. Verse 4 says, So the people sent men to Shiloh, and they brought back the ark of the covenant of the Lord Almighty, who is enthroned between the cherubim, and Eli's 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the ark of the covenant of God. The reference to the ark of the covenant of the Lord Almighty, who is enthroned between the cherubim, conveys that God's presence rested on the ark of the covenant between the 2 gold cherubim, which were like little angels attached to its lid. But the people believed that the ark would bring victory when Hophni and Phinehas carried it into battle. Verse 5 through 8 says, When the ark of the Lord's covenant came into the camp, all Israel raised such a great shout that the ground shook. Hearing the uproar, the Philistines asked, What's all this shouting in the Hebrew camp? When they learned that the ark of the Lord had come into the camp, the Philistines were afraid. A god has come into the camp. They said, Oh no, nothing like this has happened before. We're doomed. Who will deliver us from the hand of these mighty gods? They are the gods who struck the Egyptians with all kinds of plagues in the wilderness. The Philistines were afraid because they remembered stories about God's intervention for the Israelites when they had left Egypt. But the people of Israel had turned away from God, and they were only clinging to a form of godliness, a symbol of former victories. People in churches often try to live on the memories of God's blessings. The Israelites wrongly assumed that because God had given them victory in the past, he would do it again, even though they had strayed far from him. Today, as in the stories we read in Scripture, spiritual victories come through a continually renewed relationship with God. Don't live off the past, keep your relationship with God new and fresh. Verse 11 says, the ark of God was captured, and Eli's two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, died. This event fulfills the prophecy stated that Eli's sons, Hophni and Phinehas, would die on the same day. Verse 12 says, that same day a Benjamite ran from the battle line and went to Shiloh with his clothes torn and dust on his head. At this time, the city of Shiloh was Israel's religious center. The tabernacle was permanently set up there because Israel did not have a civil capital, a seat of national government. Shiloh was a natural place for a messenger to deliver the sad news from the battle. Many believe that it was during this battle that Shiloh was destroyed. Verse 18 says, if I can find it, hold on. Verse 18 says, when he mentioned the ark of God, Eli fell backward off his chair by the side of the gate. His neck was broken and he died, for he was an old man and he was heavy. He had led Israel 40 years. So, Eli was Israel's judge and high priest. His death marked the end of the dark period of the judges when most of the Israelites ignored God. Although Samuel was also a judge, his career saw the transition from Israel's rule by judges to the nation's monarchy. He began the great revival that the people of Israel would experience for the next century. The Bible does not say who became the next high priest. Samuel was not eligible because he was not a direct descendant of Aaron, but Samuel functioned as a priest at this time by offering important sacrifices throughout Israel. Verse 19 to 22 says, his daughter-in-law, the wife of Phinehas, was pregnant, and near the time of delivery, when she heard the news that the ark of God had been captured and that her father-in-law and her husband were dead, she went to labor and gave birth, but was overcome by her labor pains. And she was dying. The women attending her said, don't despair. You have given birth to a son, but she did not respond or pay any attention. She named the boy Ishabad, saying, the glory has departed from Israel, because of the capture of the ark of God and the deaths of her father-in-law and her husband. She said, the glory has departed from Israel, for the ark of God has been captured. This incident illustrates the spiritual darkness and decline of Israel. This young boy, Ishabad, was supposed to succeed his father, Phinehas, in the priesthood, but his father had been killed because he was an evil man who had desecrated the tabernacle. The terror of God leaving his people overshadowed the joy of childbirth. When sin dominates our lives, even God-given joys and pleasures seem empty. So, we hear about this god named Dagon. It's false god, more like, yeah, definitely a false god. And they take the Ark of the Covenant, Philistines, and set it up. And this is in Ashdod. They set the Ark of the Covenant in the temple of Dagon at Ashdod, and Dagon falls over, and they set him back up. And the next day, Dagon falls over, and his head and hands are falling off. So Dagon was the chief god of the Philistines, and they believed he helped them in battle and sent rain to assure bountiful harvest. Why did the Philistines place the ark in Dagon's temple? The Philistines believed that the ark represented the power and presence of the God of Israel. They thought that by taking the ark into Dagon's temple, they were taking control of Israel's God and proving that Dagon was superior. The Philistines should have immediately started to doubt their assumptions, since the great idol of Dagon fell down in front of the ark several days in a row. It was until the people living nearby began to get sick and die that the Philistines realized for certain that the ark represented a source of power greater than they had ever seen, a power that even their god Dagon could not control, because Dagon was not even real. Verse 6 to 7 says, the Lord's hand was heavy on the people of Ashdod and its vicinity. He brought devastation on them and afflicted them with tumors. When the people of Ashdod saw what was happening, they said, the ark of the God of Israel must not stay here with us, because his hand is heavy on us and on Dagon our God. Although the Philistines had just witnessed a great victory by Israel's God over their god Dagon, they didn't act upon the insight until they were afflicted with tumors, possibly in connection with bubonic plague. Similarly, today, many people don't respond to biblical truth until they experience pain. Are you willing to listen to God for truth's sake, or do you turn to him only when you are hurting? The Philistines thought they had defeated God because they had beaten Israel and captured the ark. They soon learned that no one defeats God. Their sweet victory turned sour as God began to destroy them with a plague. Verse 8 says, so they called together all the rulers of the Philistines and asked them, what shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel? He answered, have the ark of the God of Israel moved to Gath? So they moved the ark of the God of Israel. The Philistines were governed by 5 rulers. Each ruler had authority over a different city: Gath, Ekron, Ashdod, Ashkelon, and Gaza. The ark was taken to 3 of these capital cities, and each time it brought great trouble and chaos to the citizens. Verse 2 to 4. Yeah, 2 to 4. Verse 2 to 4 of chapter 6 says, the Philistines called for the priests and the diviners and said, what shall we do with the ark of the Lord? Tell us how we should send it back to its place. They answered, if you return the ark of the God of Israel, do not send it back to him without a gift. By all means, send a guilt offering to him. Then you will be healed, and you will know why his hand has not been lifted from you. The Philistines asked, what guilt offering should we send to him? They replied, 5 gold tumors and 5 gold rats, according to the number of the Philistine rulers, because the same plague has struck both you and your rulers. The Philistines had ample evidence that the God of Israel was greater than all their gods. Their leaders gave some token gifts, not out of true worship, but in order to remove the plague. God does not want tokens of our time and resources. He desires true heartfelt devotion. Our participation in worship services and our contributions please him only when they flow from hearts of love. What was the guilt offering supposed to accomplish? This was a normal reaction to trouble in the Canaanite religion. The Philistines thought their problems were the result of their gods being angry. They recognized their guilt and taken the ark, and now were trying everything they could to placate Israel's God. The diviners probably helped choose a gift they thought would placate Israel's God. The offering consisted of gold images of tumors and rats, probably replicas of things associated with the plague they were suffering under. The ceremony was not the kind of guilt prescribed in God's laws, or guilt offering prescribed in God's laws. But God used the ways of the Philistines to return the ark of the people of Israel. God will always accomplish his will and purposes, even when our attempts are imperfect or inadequate. So, verse 7 to 12 says, now then, get a new cart ready with 2 cows that have calved and have never been yoked. Hitch the cows to the cart, but take their calves away and pin them up. Take the ark of the Lord and put it on the cart, and in a chest beside it put the gold objects you are sending back to him as a guilt offering. Send it on its way, but keep watching it. If it goes up to its own territory toward Beth Shemesh, then the Lord has brought this great disaster on us. But if it does not, then we will know that it was not his hand that struck us, but that it happened to us by chance. So they did this. They placed 2 such cows and hitched them to the cart and pinned up their cows. They placed the ark of the Lord on the cart, and along with it the chest containing the gold rats and the models of the tumors. Then the cows went straight up toward Beth Shemesh, keeping on the road and following and lowing all the way. They did not turn to the right or to the left. The rulers of the Philistines followed them as far as the border of Beth Shemesh. So the Philistines, priests and diviners, devised a test to see if God was really the one who had caused all their recent troubles. 2 cows who had just given birth were hitched to a cart and sent toward Israel's borders, carrying the Ark of the Covenant. For a cow to leave her nursing calf, she would have to go against all her motherly instincts. Only God, who has power over the natural order, could cause this to happen. God sent the cows to Israel, not to pass the Philistines' test, but to show them his mighty power. The Philistines acknowledged the existence of the Hebrew God, but only as one of many deities whose favor they sought. Thinking of God in this way made it easy for them to ignore his demand that people worship him alone. Many people worship God this way. They see God as just one ingredient in a successful life. But God is far more than an ingredient. He is the source of life itself. How you became a Philistine in your attitude, treating God's favor as only another ingredient to the good life you are trying to pursue. I'll be right back again. Okay, continuing on, we're going to read verse 15 now. I'm back now. Not needed. Okay. Verse 15 says, The Levites took down the ark of the Lord together with the chest containing the gold objects and placed them on the large rock. On that day, the people of Beth Shemesh offered burnt offerings and made sacrifices to the Lord. The men of Beth Shemesh sacrificed a burnt offering to God. In Scripture, burnt offerings represent the renewal of relationship with God and the desire for forgiveness of sin. Although some of the people of Beth Shemesh later mishandled the ark, when they first received it, they rededicated their lives to God. They wanted to start over with God as a leader. And verse 19 says, But God struck down some of the inhabitants of Beth Shemesh, putting 70 of them to death because they looked into the ark of the Lord. The people mourned because of the heavy blow the Lord had dealt them. Why were 70 people killed for looking into the ark? The Israelites had made an idol of the ark. They had tried to harness God's power to use it for their own purposes, victory in battle. But the Lord of the universe cannot be controlled by humans. To protect the Israelites from his power, he had warned them not even to look at the sacred sanctuary objects in the most holy place, or they would die. Only Levites were allowed to move the ark, and then only after they had carried out their ritual cleansing. Because of their disobedience, God carried out his promised judgment. God could not allow the people to think they could use his power for their own ends. He could not permit them to disregard his warnings that come into his presence lightly. He did not want the cycle of disrespect, disobedience, and defeat to start all over again. God did not kill the men of Beth Shemesh to be cruel. He killed them because overlooking their presumptuous sin would encourage all the Israelites to ignore God. Chapter 7, verse 1 says, So the men of Kiriath Jearim came and took up the ark of the Lord. They brought it to Abinadab's house on the hill and consecrated Eleazar his son to guard the ark of the Lord. The ark was taken to Kiriath Jearim for safekeeping, and Eleazar was given the task of caring for it. Why wasn't it taken back to the tabernacle at Shiloh? Shiloh had probably been defeated and destroyed by the Philistines in an earlier battle because of the evil deeds of its priest. The tabernacle and its furniture had been saved because we know that the tabernacle was set up in Nob during Saul's reign. Shiloh, however, is never again mentioned in the historical books of the Old Testament. Samuel's new home became Ramah, his birthplace, which is further evidence of Shiloh's destruction. Verse 2 through 3 of chapter 7 says, The ark remained at Kiriath Jearim a long time, 20 years in all. Then all the people of Israel turned back to the Lord. So Samuel said to all the Israelites, If you are returning to the Lord with all your hearts, then rid yourselves of the foreign gods and the Ashtoreths, and commit yourselves to the Lord, and serve him only, and he will deliver you out of the hands of the Philistines. Israel mourned and sorrow gripped the nation for 20 years. The ark was put away like an unwanted box in an attic, and it seemed as if the Lord had abandoned his people. Samuel, now a grown man, roused them to anger by saying that if they were truly sorry, they should do something about it. How easy it is for us to complain about our problems, even to God. While we refuse to act, change, and do what he requires. We don't even take the advice he has already given us. Do you ever feel as if God has abandoned you? Ask yourself if he has already told you to do something and you've been ignoring his advice. You may not receive new guidance from God until you have carried out his previous directions with a willing heart. Samuel urged the Israelites to get rid of their foreign gods. Idols today are much more subtle than gods of wood and stone, but they are just as dangerous. Whatever holds first place in our lives or controls us is our God. Money, success, pride, material good, a relationship, a cause, technology, our image, or anything else can be an idol if it takes the place of God in our lives. The Lord alone is worthy of our service and worship, and we must let nothing rival him. If we have foreign gods, we need to ask God to help us dethrone them, making the true God our first priority. Verse 4 says, So the Israelites put away their Baals and Ashtoreths and served the Lord only. Baal was believed to be the son of El, chief deity of the Canaanites. Baal was regarded as the god of thunder and rain, thus providing the source for vegetation and agriculture. Ashtoreth was a goddess of love and war. She was called Ishtar in Babylonian, Astarte or Aphrodite in Greece. She represented fertility. The Canaanites believed that by the sexual union of Baal and Ashtoreth, the earth would be magically rejuvenated and made fertile, which is not true because Baal and Ashtoreth are false gods. Verse 5 says, Then Samuel said, assemble all Israel at Mizpah, and I will intercede with the Lord for you. Mizpah held special significance for the Israelite nation. It was there that the Israelites had gathered to mobilize against the tribe of Benjamin. Samuel was appointed to be Israel's last judge, and then Saul, Israel's first king, would be identified and presented to the people. Verse 6 says, I can find it. When they had assembled at Mizpah, they drew water and poured it out before the Lord. On that day they fasted, and they confessed, we have sinned against the Lord. Now Samuel was serving as leader of Israel at Mizpah. So, pouring water on the ground before the Lord was a sign of repenting from sin, turning from idols, and determining to obey God alone. Samuel became the last in the long line of Israel judges, a line that had begun when Israel first conquered the Promised Land. A judge was both a political and a religious leader. God was Israel's true leader, while the judges were to be God's spokespeople to the Israelites and administrators of justice throughout the land. While some of Israel's judges relied more on their own judgment than on God's, Samuel's obedience and dedication to God made him one of the greatest judges in Israel's history. Verse 12 says, Then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shin. He named it Ebenezer, saying, Thus far the Lord has helped us. The Israelites had great difficulty with the Philistines, but God rescued them. In response, the people set up a large stone as a memorial of God's great help and deliverance. During tough times, we may need to remember the crucial turning points in the past in order to help us through the present. Memorials can help us remember God's past victories and gain confidence and strength for the present. Try creating a timeline of your life, making the places where you have seen God work. It will encourage you and be a testimony to others. Verse 14 says, The towns from Ekron to Gath that the Philistines have captured from Israel were restored to Israel, and Israel delivered the neighboring territory from the hands of the Philistines, and there was peace between Israel and the Amorites. In Joshua's time, the Amorites were a powerful tribe scattered throughout the hill country on both sides of the Jordan, with a heavy concentration occupying the east side of the Jordan, opposite the Dead Sea. In the context of this verse, however, Amorites is another general name for all the non-Israelite inhabitants of Canaan. So that's it. 1 Samuel chapter 1 through 7. We're doing 8 to 14 tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow, yeah. So, prayer. Yeah. We might do Luke tonight. Pretty sure. I know I put a little thing for people to vote, like, should I do Luke or should I do 1 Corinthians? And everyone chose Luke. So, we're going with Luke. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Lord, I thank you for gathering us here today. I ask that you give us wisdom. Lord, I ask that you give us understanding so that we can shun evil and stand in awe of you, Lord. I ask that we fear nothing but you, Lord, that you give us strength and courage, Lord, that you will conquer all of our sins for us, just like how Joshua conquered the promised land, Lord. If there's anyone here who does not have you, I ask that they can find you, and if they already do have you, Lord, I ask that they continue to pursue you, Lord, and go to others and ask them to pursue you as well, Lord. I thank you for all this, and I pray for all this in your name. Amen. Good afternoon. God bless and love y'all.